what Emmet Fox does in Sermon on the Mount is he states right from the get-go that there is a spiritual key that represents the primary code of Jesus's teaching. And I love that because it gives us hope and promise that this doesn't have to be overly complicated. And I think that the greatest teachings, the greatest wisdom that we've ever heard has some level of simplicity to it, doesn't it? It's something that you just hear and it's so true. You can't deny it. You can't run away from it. Usually the sentence is like this big. It's not this big. It doesn't go on because it's just true. And so he goes ahead and states that, okay, there is something that is fundamentally true about Jesus's core message. And that key is that all external reality is being manifested and created by our thoughts, our thinking, our inner game. The inner is what's really creating the outer. And knowing that gives us power, or as he says, dominion over it. So let's talk about what he says on page 31. And he says, outside things are but the expression, expressed or pressed out, or out picturing of our inner thoughts and beliefs. And we have dominion or power over our thoughts to think as we will. And thus, indirectly, we make or mar our lives by the way in which we think. So it's a very direct definition of the truth that Jesus was getting across that I think we often forget. But the fact remains that we are all making up our own world. We are all making up this entire expression of the outer by what we are perceiving on the inner or thinking about. And once we understand that, we have power. And what's that power that we have? We have that power to control or to edit or to up-level our inner thinking. And that's freedom. Now, you being on this call may know this. You may have practiced this. You may really live by that rule. But the invitation here is to hear it in a way that is so direct that you can't not remember that this becomes the primary practice. He says in page 31 again, that the great law of the universe, however, is just as what you think in your mind, you will produce in your experience. As within, so without. You cannot think one thing and produce another. If you want to control your circumstances for harmony and happiness, you must first control your thoughts for harmony and happiness, and then the outer things will follow. And truthfully, this is a master teaching. Because in the world that we're living in, which is so focused on external things, external success, external appearances, external XYZ, the true teaching is to go back to the inner, to go back to the beliefs, the perception layer. And it's the master practice because it's harder to control your thoughts than it is to control your actions because we're thinking thousands and thousands of thoughts per day, something like 10,000 thoughts per day across our mind. So the teaching is directly saying that that's the source. Let's go there. And yes, it may be more difficult, more challenging, but the fruits of all transformation, of all change of your destiny comes from your ability to control and play with joy and fun and lightness, your inner experience, your inner perceptions. And he says that you must think spiritual thoughts, God thoughts, and give your attention to what is your life. And we have to focus on that for a minute because what we contemplate during the day is the great question, the great mystery, going all the way back to source, putting our attention towards God. And when I say God on these calls, I invite you just to explore what your own definition of God is. You may call it the universe, you may call it God, you may call it divine energy, whatever you call that source energy is fine. But the point is to always turn our hearts and our thoughts and our minds towards that great mystery. That is that contemplation, which he calls the greatest form of meditation, which is attuning yourself to the mystery, to the uncertainty, the unknown, to the vastness of this experience that's so much bigger than this part of ourselves can ever fathom. That's the practice. He says on page 34, do you have any sentimental regret or purposeless yearnings for the impossible? If so, you must cut it out at any cost. Reflect that as an immortal being, the Son of God, holding spiritual dominion. No good thing is out of your reach here, and waste no more time repining for what is over and done but make the present and the future a splendid realization of your heart's desire. So I want you to really contemplate that, because it's such a direct message. This is why I love this book so much, because this is not some feel good. We're going to come here and feel good and soak in the energy of Jesus. Yes, of course, we have some of that, but it's a very direct teaching. Okay. So Emmet Fox's interpretation is that we must cut it out. We literally just cut the negative thinking at any cost. That's the goal. So the practical invitation here is, as you're going through the day and there's negative thoughts, there's negative thinking, there's some fear, there's some concern, there's some worry, there's some anxiety, there's some, whatever it may be, sadness. Our goal here is to become so aware of it that we can remove ourselves and shift our state at the core, and doing that again and again. And he says, no good thing is out of reach. So really attune yourself to the opportunity, the possibility of being alive, with the realization that these times that we have here are so short. All of us are going to be dust in the wind. So we might as well make the most of this. Like, why not? Why not go for living an extraordinary life? Why not fully go for expressing your highest potentials? What are we waiting for? So I think the teaching here is very direct, isn't it? There's an urgency in the message. Cut it out. We need to do it again and again, habituate this way of being, retrain our thinking so that way we're thinking with the highest possible outcomes, the exciting outcomes, the things that motivate us. There's no point in wallowing in pity, sadness, depression. And I say that with love, because I understand that these things are very real. These are frequencies of thought that exist very strongly in humanity. I am in them at times. We all are. But the real goal, the real teaching here, the real pull of this message is that we have control over that. And we have to do everything we can to cut that out and get back to our more foundational experience, which is at its core joy. Very, very direct. He says on page 34, I make all things new. Behold, now is the day of salvation. His interpretation of one of the lines from Jesus, I make all things new. Behold, now is the day of salvation, meaning now, today, right now. And I invite you to not just sit here and be like, oh, this is some good stuff. Maybe tomorrow I'll think about what I can do. Maybe that relationship that's been festering in my mind that I haven't healed for a month, a year, 10 years, 20 years. Yeah, I'm going to get to that. He's right. I'm going to go ahead. The message here is no, we're going to do it now. We know better. There's no point in waiting. It's very beautiful to think about it that way.